In the early morning hours of February 21, 1994, while most of the United States was still asleep, federal agents made a quiet but historic move. Outside a modest home in Arlington, Virginia, a man stepped out of his front door, unaware that his double life was about to end. His name was Aldrich Hazen Ames, a 52-year-old senior officer of the Central Intelligence Agency. Within moments, Ames was arrested by FBI agents and charged with conspiracy to commit espionage against the United States. What made this arrest extraordinary was not just the crime itself, but the identity of the man being taken into custody. Aldrich Ames was not a low-level clerk or an accidental security risk. He was one of the most trusted counterintelligence officers in the CIA, a man whose job was to catch spies, not become one. His betrayal would later be recognized as one of the most devastating intelligence failures in American history. To understand how this could happen, it is necessary to go back decades earlier, to the origins of Ames' career and the culture of intelligence during the Cold War. Aldrich Ames joined the CIA in 1962, during one of the most intense periods of rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union. Espionage was not just a profession. It was a silent battlefield where nations fought without armies. Ames followed in the footsteps of his father, who had also worked for the agency, giving him an early sense of belonging within the intelligence community. From the beginning, however, Ames' career showed signs of instability. His performance reviews were inconsistent. Supervisors noted problems with motivation, judgment, and reliability. He struggled with alcohol abuse, a problem that repeatedly affected his work. In many organizations, these issues might have stalled or ended a career. Inside the CIA of the Cold War era, they were often overlooked. Despite these warning signs, Ames continued to receive sensitive assignments. Over time, he gained access to highly classified information, particularly within counterintelligence, the most secretive and critical branch of the agency. Counterintelligence officers knew the identities of foreign agents who were secretly working for the United States. In other words, Ames knew who would live and who would die if exposed. By the early 1980s, Ames' personal life was unraveling. His marriage was failing, his expenses were growing, and his income could not support his lifestyle. He was deeply in debt, facing financial pressure that he felt unable to escape. At the same time, the CIA did not closely monitor the finances of its officers, even those with access to the most sensitive secrets. In April 1985, Aldrich Ames made a decision that crossed an irreversible line. He walked into the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C., and offered to sell information to the KGB. This was not an act of ideological conversion. Ames was not driven by belief in communism or hatred of the United States. His motivation was simple and disturbingly ordinary: money. The Soviets immediately recognized the value of what he was offering. Ames did not begin with minor details. He provided names of human assets inside the Soviet Union. These were individuals who had risked everything to provide intelligence to the United States. Within months, many of these agents were arrested. Some disappeared into prisons. Others were executed. Inside the CIA, alarms were quietly going off. American intelligence networks in the Soviet Union were collapsing at an unprecedented rate. Case officers were stunned. Analysts searched for explanations. Some suspected technical surveillance. Others blamed bad tradecraft or unlucky timing. Very few believed that a senior officer inside the CIA could be responsible. This assumption proved disastrous. For nearly 9 years, Aldrich Ames continued spying, undetected. He met with Soviet and later Russian intelligence handlers, passed documents, and delivered some of the most sensitive information the United States possessed. In return, he was paid millions of dollars, often in cash. Over time, Ames became one of the highest-paid spies in history. His lifestyle changed dramatically. He purchased an expensive home. He drove luxury vehicles. He paid cash for major expenses. To outside observers, these were glaring red flags. Within the CIA, however, they were rationalized, ignored, or never fully investigated. Internal security failures, bureaucratic complacency, and misplaced trust allowed Ames to continue his betrayal year after year. Even as the Cold War ended and the Soviet Union collapsed, Ames did not stop. He continued providing information to Russian intelligence services, proving that his loyalty was never to a cause, but to himself. By the early 1990s, the damage was undeniable. The CIA was forced to confront the possibility that the collapse of its Soviet-era networks was not an accident, but an inside job. A renewed counterintelligence investigation was launched, involving financial analysis, surveillance, and behavioral reviews. This time, the evidence began to align. Investigators noticed Ames' unexplained wealth. They reviewed his access to sensitive files. They analyzed timelines that matched arrests of American assets with his movements and assignments. Slowly, the picture became clear. The spy they were hunting had been sitting among them for years. On February 21, 1994, the investigation reached its conclusion. Ames was arrested outside his home and later charged with espionage. Facing overwhelming evidence, he pleaded guilty. In exchange for cooperation, he avoided the death penalty and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The fallout from the Ames case was severe. The CIA faced public embarrassment, internal reckoning, and deep institutional reform. Security procedures were rewritten. Financial monitoring became stricter. Counterintelligence training was re-examined. Careers were ended. Reputations were destroyed. But the human cost could not be undone. The agents who had been exposed, imprisoned, or executed because of Ames' actions were gone forever. Today, the Aldrich Ames case stands as a warning etched into intelligence history. It reveals how trust can become vulnerability, how routine can become blindness, and how the most dangerous threats are not always external enemies, but insiders who understand the system well enough to exploit it. Aldrich Ames did not break into the CIA. He did not hack it. He lived inside it. And for nearly a decade, he sold its secrets piece by piece, while the world watched the Cold War end, unaware that one of its final and most destructive battles was being fought from within.